Everybody, welcome back. Episode 17 of the Fast Motor Podcast. Elijah, my dad, Randy. Fun week in racing. I will start with my weekend. I got to go back to Idaho this weekend. My cousin was getting married. And Meridian Speedway had Memorial Day races. So I got to be back out there shooting for some people, got to see some good racing. I was shooting some videos, and I was 3 for 3 on the first mains with Riley Rogers, who was one of our guests a couple of weeks ago. In the mini stock, he won. Kendra Ajapente won the Pro 4, and then Rob Grice won the NSX Sprint Car main. I was 3 for 3, and then the modifieds broke it. Tommy Harrod won the modified main, and then the late models was a good battle between Andrew Palmer and Jesse James Lawson, and Lawson got the win on a late restart. Other racing, again, a whole bunch of it. High Limit at Grandview, Aaron Reitzel continues his hot streak. The Tar Heel 250 ASA Stars at Hickory. Caden Quapple stole it from Caden Brown late. Holman Classic at Terre Haute. Mitchell Moles gets his first career rifle there. USAC Sprints then went over to Circle City. Briggs Danner took it home. The Outlaws had a few shows. Jacksonville, Carson Macedo got the win. Then they went to Knoxville for a little tune-up, and Aaron Reitzel back in victory lane. And then later on, they were at Huset's, and Buddy Kofoid is dominant at Huset's yet again. He has won the last, I think, 5 shows there or something like that. Little 500, Cody Swanson stole it from Davey Jr. late to get his, I believe it was third win there. Fourth? Okay. And then Paris, salute to Indy, the CRA sprint cars out there. RJ Johnson got the win. And then the ARCO West series at Colorado, and Trevor Huddleston picked up the win out there. So before we get into the Charlotte stuff and the Indy 500 stuff, I'm going to let Dad intro our guest. We got a fun one this week.
Yeah. Something of it also note, Aaron Reitzel, that was his 6th straight win, I think, in a row.
Yeah.
Just overall. So
and I think it's his 6th $20,000 plus win on the year as well.
Okay. Maybe that's what it was too.
That's what it is.
So yeah, our guest today, Brett Griffin. I got to know Brett probably just through kind of a sponsorship associates. He worked for Cox Marketing, I believe was their name. Amy Walsh came on to do my PR when I was with Citgo SuperGuard. And then at the same time, Brett was working with Elliott Sadler with Citgo SuperGuard on the Cup side with the Woods brothers. So obviously, Amy being new to the sport, even though she's now had a long career in the sport, Brett was kind of a mentor and a guide to her, and just a bunch of friendships got on. And then, as Brett, and he'll tell us a little bit of his story, but, that was, kind of a PR rep. And then he kind of got into the business side of it. And then the sponsorship, acquisitions, and then driver management, and then, on to spotting and finding a role there. And then he became really a voice, a voice on social media, a voice on, door bumper clear. And, we'll talk a little bit about that kind of transition through his career. So before we talk about those, we'll bring Brett on and talk about this weekend, because it's such a big weekend.
Brett, thanks for coming in.
Man, I'm having to knock the rust off. I hadn't done a podcast in probably over a year. I've only done one podcast since I left DBC. So, Elijah, appreciate you reaching out and letting me blow you off a few times. And then you're like a hot chick. I finally had to say, yeah, let's go on a date. So here we are.
Yeah. So this weekend, let's talk about Indy real quick. The Speedway, to me, that is just a race, just because of all the pomp and circumstance, just there's so much going on. Used to have, back home again in Indiana, the flyovers, the balloons, knowing there's 390,000 people there, and just the energy. Just living in Indy for a few years, the month of May was just unlike any other place ever. Because the fire hydrants are wrapped in checkered flags. The city just embraces it in such a way. So when race day comes, that place is electric. And it's not electric just because of the race, but because of the history. And then you have a race that comes down to the last lap, side by side for second and third. People don't realize that place probably has 6 inches that you can miss the groove by before you're headed to the fence, because there's marbles and rocks, especially after that kind of a race. So for Felix to run on the outside, and the air from air, not ERROR, like an air to be made there is just so close, and then to come away and pass for the win was just a remarkable story. Then obviously the news earlier in that week that Kyle had passed away, I think it's more shocking because he didn't pass away in a race car. I think we've learned in the sport to deal with, I don't know, death or circumstances of death, meaning a plane crash or a race car crash. To me, it's just more impactful when it's kind of medical. On a healthy 41-year-old, just seems so odd and out of character for what we've dealt with. So I thought the remembrance was remarkable. I certainly didn't expect Samantha and Brexton to be there, and to watch Kurt, who was a friend of mine or is a friend of mine, to have to deal with that pain and to see that pain on so many. And Brett, you've been in the sport more currently than I have, so I'm sure there's a lot more ties. But Richard Childress to do this for the second time with his premium driver, and pass away, and the wreaths on the steps, and and to go on with the next weekend, to change a number and go on with the race, has to be just painful to bring back the memories of Dale Sr. and then to relive them again. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on it.
Man, I don't even know where to start, Randy. I am, obviously spotting part-time this year for Richard Childress Racing. My last interaction with Kyle would have been at our super speedway race last year, the cutoff race at Daytona, when he had to win in order to make the playoff. Austin Dillon was already in. I was spotting for Austin Hill, and we sat down as drivers and spotters and crew chiefs to develop a plan on how we could give ourselves the best opportunity to win this race. And Kyle was typical Kyle. He was a competitor. He was a smart ass. He was a selfish race car driver. And I say all the time, a lot of the best race car drivers that I've met they know when to be selfish and how to be selfish and how to take it to their advantage, and Kyle was one of those guys with immense talent. And so that's the last real meaningful interaction. I did have an opportunity to spot for him one time at a truck race at Talladega. We finished second. We lost the lead on the very last lap to Todd Bodine. Jeff Dickerson was out that week with a back injury, but Kyle and I knew each other for a very long time. I spent some Monday nights at his house when he used to have poker games during the NFL matchups on Monday Night Football. And Kyle was young and he was making his way. And he came to me when he was transitioning out of Jeff Dickerson being his manager, and he actually talked to me about me potentially doing that, me potentially spotting for him. So Kyle was a guy that early on in his career, I was pretty close to him. We hung out at Cocktail Cove on Lake Norman. Later on in his career, no, not so much. Again, I haven't had a lot of interaction with him, since. But Kyle was the definition of a badass race car driver, one of the best to ever do it. And, I knew nothing about his sickness until NASCAR and Richard Childress Racing put out the statement simultaneously on Thursday morning last week. And, my phone started blowing up, and a lot of people inside of the industry and outside of the industry were asking me what's going on. And I didn't have one person, Randy, that I felt comfortable reaching out to and saying, hey, what's going on? Because I could tell from the tone of the messages that it was extremely serious. Then I had a friend of mine call me from NASCAR, and he said, we have a quarterly meeting that is supposed to take place today, and it was just canceled. And, in my 8 to 10 years that I've been here, we've never canceled this meeting. I think it's related to Kyle Busch. And I was like, well, probably not. Like you just think, business as usual. I mean, you and I have lived this game a long time. You got to do the next thing. The show must go on mentality. And as that day, progressed and as, lunchtime rolled around and early in the afternoon rolled around, we started getting some really tough updates to swallow. And, ultimately he lost his life that day. And I don't think there'll ever be, a bigger shock, like you said, outside of a race car. I mean, you guys know when you put your helmets on and you buckle up, no matter whether it's practice, a test, qualifying, or a race, there's a chance you won't come back. But when you have a guy, and I thought it was really, fair for his legacy that the last race he'll ever run was an all-star race. Because if there was ever an all-star, man, it was Kyle Busch. And I think that's what people will remember him as. And I think that it's been, I was talking to my cousin today, Hampton Autry, who was one of the people who took me to the racetrack when I was a really young kid. And he was like, I hated Kyle Busch growing up. I hated Kyle Busch as a man. I not hated Kyle as a man, but he was a grown man and just hated Kyle Busch because he drove a Toyota and, all the things. And he's like, hey, when he went to drive for Richard Childress Racing, I gave him a break and I became a fan. He was also a big Dale Earnhardt fan growing up, right? So I think you look at, Kyle was the hated guy for a long time, and we need bad guys. We need good guys. But I think a lot of people have given him some grace over the years. And listen, there's no right way to go out. Whether you're 40 or you're 50 or you're 80 or whatever, right? There's no right or wrong way to go out. But this was one of the biggest shocks that I've certainly ever come across in my time in the sport. And I don't think the sport will know the ramifications of it for till 10 years from now. I mean, I said when Dale Earnhardt died, I was driving down I-95 and I was going home after the race. Elliott had finished like 16th in that race. I remember what I said in Dale Earnhardt's wreck. Spin in front of you. He's up high. Go low. Clear high. You're all clear. You're by the wreck. Remember, we got to finish the race. And so we finished the race. I run across. I get in my car at Chick-fil-A. I start driving down 95 North. And Brooke Hondros, which was Michael Waltrip's PR lady, called me and said he didn't make it. And she was bawling. And I had to pull over, and I started bawling. And I said, we've just lost our Michael Jordan. We've just lost our Tiger Woods. We won't know what the fallout of this is. And the odd thing was, it made Dale Jr. a superstar overnight. It made the sport increase in popularity. And it took a while, for the Dale factor really to be known. And I think that's where we're at now in this sport. And here we are 20 years plus after his passing. But I think to my point is, I don't know how soon we'll know how big of a deal this really is to the sport of NASCAR to lose a Kyle Busch, at 40 years old, who was certainly still capable of winning races. I know they had a tough couple seasons, but I also know he wasn't done winning Cup races.
Yeah. And, there's an interesting point, just as you were saying that to me, how many people I've ran into that were Kyle Busch fans because of M&Ms when they were growing up and they were young kids and they didn't know who to pull for. And so there's M&Ms on the side of a car. And so that it was immediately a draw. And then they became fans because, one, he's just an amazing driver and winning. So that's always fun. And it's like, so we have a generation that grew up with Kyle, right? I mean, you had that kind of legacy of Dale, and you kind of have that older school fan that's still around and unhappy with most things because it's not how Dale would have done it, or Dale wouldn't have liked this, or Dale wouldn't have, which is funny. I think I've told Elijah the story. I can remember being at the racetrack when Dale Earnhardt was introduced and booed 100%. More than cheered. Like, the love affair for him today is not the love affair I remember as a racer being there. So, and Kyle had a little bit of that same kind of evolution of, right, like superstar, very good, kind of crass, kind of, say what he thought, wouldn't say because he's been told he can't speak, and kind of played that game. And then, begin to, not win as much at the end, through multiple reasons, but also became a father, and people got to see that different side of him, which is a more personal side that you probably never really saw of Kyle. From a fan's perspective, you saw him at a racetrack, you saw that he wanted to win and only cared about winning, but that's really all you knew about him, right? You didn't know this second side. And then people begin to see this kind of there and kind of begin to root for him. You want that guy to win again. And now who's the villain, which is, obviously those guys are coming along and it's just different. You're right. I mean, we lived through the era of Kenny Irwin, Blake Alexander, Adam Petty, Tony Roper. I was in the hospital with Tony and Michelle. I remember pulling off the track and Tiffany meeting me at the window net and said, "We got to go." And I'm like, and I'd seen the helicopter, and you just knew when you saw a live flight, you knew it wasn't pretty, especially in that era.
Yeah.
And we went there, and I remember, Wayne Otten coming to me from NASCAR and said, "Hey, our plane's their plane, whatever they need, hey, can you, be kind of our representative here during this piece of this?" And as a driver, I think I buried 21 friends over my career.
That's insane. Yeah.
I mean, they weren't all close friends, but I was either at a racetrack where they passed away or was part of the sport or whatever. And so it was something that you understood. And this just is different, right? This is, a sickness. I don't know. It just hit a little bit different. And, he was still a guy that was so fresh in the sport. So
yeah. Dale Earnhardt, Randy, has saved more than 20 people's lives. Since he passed away. I mean, and I could go through the Michael McDowell hits at Texas, the David Ruderman hit at Watkins Glen, the Kyle Busch hit when he broke both of his legs. It could have easily broken his neck. The Denny Hamlin hit that broke his back. I could name crash after crash. Elliott Sadler's hit at Pocono when he hit a mile of dirt down the backstretch.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, man, I thought Elliott's eyes popped out of his head. He hit so hard. I mean, that hit was over 60 front G's. So to your point, have we become immune to racing isn't as dangerous as it was?
Oh, absolutely.
100%.
I think we go through these, and I hate to say it, but I think the sport suffers because of that, right? Like people love daredevils. They love that there's a risk. You're seeing a lot of back injuries. You're seeing a lot of some things, but sometimes that, people loved racing because those were the daredevils. Like, they were gritty. They were willing to put it out there. They were willing to do whatever it took. And it separated you from somebody else. Everybody drives their street car. Everybody goes around a corner and thinks they could be. I mean, commonly people go, "I could have been a great race car driver. I drive fast." It's like, it had nothing to do with driving fast. It has driving to do with on the edge all day and living just beyond that edge and saving it, time and time again, and doing it with what that risk is. But now you lock yourself in a little cocoon. And hey, I'm all for the safety. Don't get me wrong. I'm
100%
thankful for it, but it's different. And so it begins to get, comfortable. I live in a world now where most of the people that I come in contact with have never even met a race car driver. Like, they're not living in this world. They don't understand what it is. They don't understand when you buckle in and that, you lock yourself into that thing, pull that helmet on, put those gloves on, that you do question, like, this is a day it could leave you, right? And so, that's what people like. They want those warriors, those dudes. They want to know that separates, somebody, they're looking and watching somebody different.
But I'm going to tell you one thing, Randy, and this is no disrespect to you, your talent, or anybody you ever raced with. I'm telling you right now, the sport's safer, thank God. But these drivers are the most talented drivers that have ever existed in motorsports history. These guys, when you look at Keelan Harvick and you look at Brexton Busch and you look at the amount of training and the amount of resources and the amount of literally global travel that they've done to sharpen their craft, by the time Brent Cruz at 15 or 16 years old was ready to be a Cup driver, I'm convinced he could have gotten a Cup car and been just fine. By law, he has to wait a minute. He has to be 18. So his whole career slowed down because of it. But I'm telling you right now, these drivers today are better than drivers have ever been in history.
Well, I think you bring a great point up, and I agree with you. I remember when I first stepped out, because, when I was there, you needed to be 36 years old to be a cup driver. They didn't want to talk to you until that time, because you hadn't earned your stripes, right? You hadn't put in the miles. You hadn't ran enough races. You didn't bring the experience. And I always remember going, gosh, those guys are so young. How can they do it? They're running 100 and some races a year. They're homeschooled. They're, and now you get into the technology with the sims. I was at some GT4 races a year ago, and they were talking about just in the ABS per corner on the racetrack, throughout a lap, not a race, a lap.
Right. After every
knowing
corner.
how to modulate fuel. Like, people talk about fuel savings on the cup side. You don't think they're modulating fuel there so they can reach so many pit stops? They know exactly when their tire temp comes up where they can push the car to another level. I mean, the amount of, and Elijah and I talked about this last week with Kyle Larson. I said, Kyle Larson is a raw race car driver. Throw all that cup field in 5 different cars on 5 different tracks, and that guy's probably going to win every time, because his rear end in a matter of seconds can figure out how to find an edge of a car. But now you're talking a cup car that's, a thousandth of an inch, ride adjustment, and you're in a sim all week and you're doing all these adjustments. I don't know that that's what makes Kyle Larson the best driver. He's the best driver because he can show up and find the edge. But, if somebody else has found that edge through sim work or somewhere else, like, they become better, and they're just different. And you're watching Keelans and Brextons and, and there's a lot of them, right? There's a lot of kids that these parents have been able to invest in them, and they're bringing another level of talent that is very different and very refined.
One thing to note too, though, by the time Keelan Harvick, and this doesn't mean Kevin Harvick has spent this much money, by the way, but by the time Keelan Harvick makes it to 18 years old, how many tens of millions of dollars do you think have been invested in his racing career?
Yeah, a ton.
I'm serious. 20 million? Is that a fair guess?
Yeah,
probably more.
Well, you see it everywhere, right?
Cars.
I mean, you see it everywhere. Elijah, how many private lessons have you had by the time you got to 16 years old? How many hitting lessons, pitching lessons? How many times did and he, Brett, this is a great, and I'm going to brag on Elijah at baseball because I know you have a son that plays. But when Elijah was a freshman in high school, he would get himself up at 4:30 in the morning, go to a weight room. He'd go then and get perfect straight A's, because academics mean a lot, because scholarships weren't as broad for baseball. Then he'd practice for 3 hours with the team. Then he'd go back into the cages at night after homework was done. Like, that was the investment he made. And, that is the 10,000 hours of, Gladwell that they talk about, that, you have to put in this much time to be an expert. And that's what you see drivers are doing. But that's what you see kids doing in basketball, on, AAU, to be that. Like, we are seeing such a refined sports, and automotive is in that same pathway.
It is. But I think people need to realize that, yes, Keelan Harvick is putting the work in. Yes, Kyle Busch is putting the work in. And this is what I told my sister last night. The thing that probably breaks my heart the most about Kyle passing is he had a clear path for Kyle Busch from now until he got his first Truck Series start. I promise you, he knew every year exactly where they were going to do, how they were going to train. He was going to train the mental fortitude. He was going to train him physically. He was going to have him in race cars. He was going to have him all over the world racing. And by the time Kyle Busch made it to 16 years old, there was no doubt he was going to be a NASCAR driver. I'm not saying he won't make it. I'm just saying Kyle's plan won't be the same, because Kyle the mentor, Kyle the dad, Kyle the superstar Hall of Fame race car driver won't be there to keep his thumb on it. And let's be honest, man, I lost my dad when I was 7 years old. And I remember, that's probably one of my youngest memories I even have that's a vivid memory. It changes the trajectory of your life. My life worked out just fine. I have no question that Brexton will work out just fine either. But losing his dad at this age is going to change his personal and his professional plan. And I just hope that some of the other people in Brexton's life, like Kurt's an easy one to name here because he's his uncle. And listen, Tom Busch, I made a funny joke. I don't even know if I can make this joke on the show, but I'll make it anyway. I made a funny joke 20 years ago. I said, you've got the Mannings, Archie Manning, who can have Eli and Peyton. You got Tom Busch that had Kurt and Kyle, two of the best to ever do it. We've never had brothers both be that good, both be champions, both be that good at the cup level. I'm like, this guy should be a sperm donor for motorsports. Right. This guy's got the recipe figured out. I do not doubt that Tom will be very involved in the continued development of Brexton. But I just hate, of all the things that we're looking at and talking about with Kyle, I hate that the path, because you had listen, I've spent over $10,000 on private baseball lessons this year. That's a lot of money for me, the guy that's working, part-time. To your point, though, that's what it takes is resources, commitment, and direction, or you don't get to make it to the big time.
It is. And I do think, though, you can't quite compare apples to oranges, because a private baseball lesson from California and here, $60. That's not a set of tires. If you want to go out and test and get laps, and you got tracks that race every week. Now, Nashville here runs 9 times a year, so it might equal out to be the same. But, if you're running in certain classes, other places that run twice a month, 3 times a month, once a week, I think that racing is still being around it on the short track level. When I go doing shoots and stuff and seeing how much they're putting into it, you can race on the budget, but you're not going to be successful.
You're not going to be fast if you got to worry about how much money you're spending.
Budget, so
it's always been that way. Elliot and I were talking this week, Randy. And by the way, I thought it was cool that Elliot gave you a shout out for was it your 70th birthday or your 60th birthday?
60th birthday,
man.
Oh, 60th. Put so much on me. Jeez.
But anyway, I was talking to Elliot and I was like, hey, man, Wyatt's winning a lot of races in this go-kart. What's the next step? And he told me what series it was, and he told me how much it costs. And I won't say which series, but it's $150,000 a year. And I'm like, man, that's a big step. And he's like, yeah, but I would rather spend $150,000 to go to that series than to go over here to this other series where it's $25,000 a race, and all they do is wreck each other and race each other like complete assholes. I'm not putting him in that series. I'd rather do the series that he referenced for $150,000. The reality is you can't just buy a pair of tennis shoes and a basketball and go be a great basketball player. You can go be a great basketball player. If you're 6'5" and you can dribble and shoot, you're going to have an opportunity to play college ball. Racing, it doesn't work that way.
No.
Yeah. You can't separate yourself on the talent alone.
No, I mean, even you look at Kyle Busch. You talk about Kyle Larson. We'll say Kyle Larson instead of Kyle Busch. How many bad race cars has Kyle Larson ever driven? How many teams has he driven for that were underfunded, that didn't have enough budget to have the best of the best, right? And I say this with all due respect to Kyle Larson. He is probably the greatest race car driver in the world right now from a diversity standpoint. You run 10 different vehicles, he's going to win in 9 out of 10, and he may even win in F1. He's that freaking good. But he's never, Ryan Blaney, Kyle Busch, I could keep going. I can name a lot of them never had to drive bad race cars. Well, you look at Jeff Burton, who is a Hall of Famer, 21 Cup wins. I called him 2 days ago to wish him congratulations on making the Hall of Fame. I remember him coming in the Cup Series driving the number 8 Stavola Brothers car. That car wasn't that good. You know what I mean? You had to come in, to your point, do really good things when you were 25 to 30 to get that really good shot when you were 30 to 35, and it's not that way anymore.
Yeah, you don't, which is going to be really interesting, right? Because you have the Brent crews that are ready. You have Heim that will be up there next year. They're younger that going into Cup, which means somebody has to vacate a seat. And, you kind of have this, you wouldn't have thought of them aging out, but at some point they're going to age out because they're new, young, fresh talent, which brings new eyes and new finances and backing that's going to come in. And we're going to have I don't know if it happens in the next year or so, but pretty soon you're going to have a group that are ready to come into Cup, and somebody's going to have to be forced out. It's no longer going to be a waiting game, right? Like Heim had to wait for things to line up for him to make a spot in there. Before long, that's not going to happen. They're going to come with, everything prepared for them to go, and it's going to push somebody out.
Yeah, and the thing is too, Randy, it's a lot different when you were around here running every weekend. There were 40 cup owners in the sport, and we had 75 entries showing up. We
Yeah.
were fielding 43 cars. When NASCAR made the rule, and this part of this rule was because of Jack Roush. At the time, he had 5 teams, 5 full-time cup teams, and they said you can't own more than 4 cup cars. And then the race was on to get to 4. And most of the teams like Yates and Childress, and I could keep naming them, they own 2. Well, then they were in a race to get to 4. So you consolidated the ownership group, and now you've got, 12 to 14 owners, and you really only have 3 that are currently around. I mean, I hate to take Stuart Haas out of the equation because I know Haas is still here, but not in the capacity that it was from an OEM tier 1 perspective. You've only got 3 teams that are winning championships, and it's Hendrick, and it's Gibbs, and it's Penske. And I don't love that for the sport. But let's not be, crazy to what we've seen here. We've got Spire Motorsports that isn't even a tier 1 team with 2 wins this year. The 4th most wins in this car, the Gen 7 or new Gen or whatever we call it, car of today, car tomorrow, it's Trackhouse. I mean, like there's just not a lot of teams that can stack up against those top 3. But, oh, by the way, here comes 2311 with all the JGR prepared equipment. And we almost are about to see another deal where Furniture Row is back showing up, because I think Tyler Reddick's the hottest guy in Cup right now.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think it's interesting, right? Like Spire, Jeff, we spent some time with Jeff in Darlington because I was around Jeff when he, worked on midgets in Indiana, and, had no idea what his career path was for years. And then all of a sudden I hear this name appear, and I'm like, could that possibly be Jeff that breaking down tires and, on a gasoline alley, midget team shop for Tice Carlson? And it was like, what a fascinating story to find his way into Cup and now be, along the winning ownership group. So
not only that, Randy, you're winning races at the Cup level when less than 10 years ago you owned a charter and didn't even own a car. You were farming out everything. You didn't have a shop. You didn't have a crew. You didn't have a pit crew. You didn't have nothing. Like, you literally were farming everything out. And now all of a sudden, boom, you've got multiple charters, winning races. Like, that may be one of the biggest success stories that we've seen in NASCAR in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
And there goes beyond NASCAR for them, because they got a super successful truck team, and obviously the Cup's got their speed, but they've got a sprint car now. They've got sponsorship in drag racing. Like, they've started to, I think they kind of followed Trackhouse, started doing it a little bit too, of kind of like branching it out and spreading to more facets of motorsports.
Well, you have investment groups involved. The sports became, and Brett, you could speak on that much more eloquent than I could, of just what those, you have an investment group that bought into Gibbs. You have, the investment group into, Spire. Like, you have that appeal that's coming along that way. One, it's lucrative, right? Like, look at the charters. Are now, we're talking 100 million is what the charters they're saying. The Haas is, the rumor is out there that Haas is available for 100 million, maybe.
When you hear investment group, this is what fans need to realize. When you hear private equity, and when you hear investment group, and you hear investors, all of those people want return on their money. They're not coming in here to give you tens of millions of dollars to lose money. And so when you look at when Michael Jordan's group and Front Row won the lawsuit, they turned a charter from being worth $40 million to worth $100 million. So now you want to look at Hendrick Motorsports. What are they worth? $700-800 million as a race team now. Back in the 2000s, they would say the oldest saying in racing is, you want to know how to have a small fortune in racing? Start with a big one. You literally, Tyler Jett, you come in and you spend all this money and you sell everything for nickels on the dollar. That's not the case anymore. And I am super thankful for that, because it gives everybody a much bigger staple. What we have to look at, though, Randy, on all these sides of things, and Elijah, I know you love to go to racetracks. We need you at the racetrack. We need more people at the racetracks. We need butts in seats because it needs to be the best place to be on a Sunday afternoon in that area. When I turn on the TV and it's half full, it breaks my heart because I know good and well there's enough race fans around these racetracks to pack them out. We got to figure out how to market to them, how to get to them, and how to get these butts back in the seats because that makes it the place to be. Indy 500 this weekend, I turned it on and you watch the drone shot coming out of turn 4, and I got chills because I know there's over 250,000 people there. I know they didn't change their model after COVID. They left the month of May, the month of May. They do everything the way they want to do it. And for whatever reason, it's worked with the fan base. And I just don't want us to go to the Daytona 500 and sell it out and then see struggling attendance at all these other tracks when I know good and damn well there's enough race fans around there to fill those places up.
Yeah. So Brett, what are your thoughts on that? Like, why? Like, everybody wants to talk that the O'Reilly series is the best thing in racing, which, like in stock car racing anyway. And I don't disagree. Like, it's great racing, but those grandstands are empty. And you and I remember when those weren't. Like, those were full. And the truck races, I remember being at Texas, a standalone event. We had 79,000 people there. Like, and you also go to the short tracks and no one's showing up. I mean, a cars race at Nashville filled the place, which was fantastic.
But their local shows got 500 people there, maybe.
Like, and racing right now is as good as it's been, even at the cup level. And there's a lot that's could be negative, but for me, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you wouldn't have a track house coming in and being able to be competitive. You certainly wouldn't have Aspire ever being competitive. If you weren't Hendricks, Penske, or Gibbs, or Gibbs affiliate, you weren't going to go compete at all. You didn't have a shot. Look at Childress. Their fall from grace in that aspect and trying to build themselves up now. But like, the racing's good. You have more guys that are competitive. You have Hocevar that's coming in new and fresh and doing well and big personality. And you have, like, there's a lot that's positive. Why aren't they filling it? They're probably the most giving to fans that there's been. Like, you go to a football game. I just saw a guy went to a baseball game with his 2 or 3 sons, and the concession stands was almost $400.
That's crazy. So I've got opinions. And they may get me in trouble again, but I'm going to share them anyway. When I look at the racetrack, Randy, and I mean this with all due respect to SMI, because I have a lot of good friends that work there. I mean this with all due respect to Marcus Smith. Spend some money on your facility. When I go to the Knights game in downtown Charlotte, the minor league affiliate that's in Charlotte, it is a beautiful facility with a beautiful backdrop. And it is well worth my ticket price. I'm not sitting in bird shit, and I'm not on top of the person beside of me. Like, I think that owners need, and I say this across the board. You look at what they did to Daytona. They spent $400 million on a renovation, and they sell it out every year. And not only because it's Daytona 500, it's nice. It is literally a nice venue. Charlotte Motor Speedway needs an entire makeover. Like, you can have it feel nostalgic like Darlington, but still have it nice. So to your point, I think we're missing accommodations on some of these venues. I think our suites are outdated. I think the fan experience in the campgrounds has got to change, because if we show up to Bristol Motor Speedway and there's a bunch of campers there, there's going to be a lot of butts in seats. Literally all the way across the country, Phoenix, Arizona, even though it's close to a major city, whereas Bristol isn't, if there's not a lot of campers as far as you can see, behind turn 1 and 2, there's not going to be a lot of people in the stands. So you got to fill the campgrounds and you got to give them a nice venue. I agree with you. The on-track product is probably as good as it's ever been across all 3 series. I think what fans are struggling with is they scream for change on things. And for whatever reason, NASCAR is often reluctant to give it to them, whether it be more horsepower, right? Whether it be moving the numbers, whatever it is. I feel like when NASCAR makes a concession, it's like 5 years after the fans were screaming for it. So I think we've got to be more in tune with what's really important to our fans, and let's not wait on what those things are. If you've got drivers screaming for more horsepower, fans screaming for more horsepower, industry people, spotters on podcasts screaming for more horsepower, then give them more horsepower. Prove them wrong. Give them 1,000 horsepower and make it not work to say that wasn't it, right? So I just think there's a lot of small changes that they got to make. But Elijah, I think you're as in YOU apostrophe RE. You are the key demographic for the future of auto racing, right? Because young people, they would rather have a phone in their hand than have a nice car to drive. They would rather have, all the apps on their phone than to go to their car wash and clean their car up and get it ready for a date on a Saturday night, right? So I think they've got to really tap into the young people's minds. And listen, Randy, you and we're 50 and 60 years old. We don't know what 20-year-olds want.
Maybe 70. I don't know. Maybe.
Could be. But I think we've got to ask the young people, what do you want? What makes you excited about this? What would it take for you to bring a friend to the racetrack, right? I mean, I think the sport is fine. I think it's going to be fine. I do think we're in a very big dip, and we don't need to dip any further on the Cup side. I think it's ironic that the O'Reilly Series ratings are trickling up and the Cup ratings continue to trickle down. I think there's a lot of things that people have to figure out. And I'm glad Steve O'Donnell is now the new president CEO, because I think there's a lot of things Steve Phelps did well, but I think the disconnect between him and the fan base was large. And I think Steve O'Donnell has done a good job of showing grace to the fans and saying, hey, we screwed up. We're going to fix this. And I think it's just a really, really, really big ship, and it ain't going to turn overnight. It's going to take a minute.
I think I don't disagree with you. I think we've got to find a way to embrace the younger generation. And I think every sport's going to have that challenge. Baseball has that challenge on
not anymore though. It did, but they sped up the games and the younger generation's back.
I love the pitch clock. Pitch clock is the best thing to ever happen to baseball.
I do too. I hate that they let them act like clowns and guys don't get plunked in the head anymore, but that's another argument.
But, Elijah and I were talking about it. Like, if we could throw everything the way and I want to go back real quick. One thing I think NASCAR did in some aspects was listen too much. They were trying to listen too much, to too
many people. Many people. Yeah. Yeah.
And they were making changes, and I think they lost their way. I remember being, at an alumni event, and I said, let's just stand up for who we are and just say, see you if you don't like it. Like, at least it's, where it's good. More horsepower. I'd love more horsepower. I don't know why the reasoning came for that. People always ask me, what was your favorite track? I'm like, anything that was flat and no grip, because it was a place I could compete as a driver. If we went to high banking, D-shaped ovals where aero and engine came in, I wasn't with those kind of teams. So I wasn't going to win because I didn't have, I wasn't Cup affiliated, or we couldn't, I couldn't get Hendrick power then. So I liked something where it kind of pushed back into me. But, Elijah and I were talking about, maybe it was when we were driving to Darlington, and we were like, okay, throw everything out we know. And how do we have an interaction at the track? Like, I went to the Long Beach Grand Prix, last year, and it became a strategy race within the first 10 laps. Well, in the grandstand, with not having scanners on, that was a useless race for me. I didn't even understand what was going on.
Yeah, you're lost.
So you left and you finished watching it at home, because get out of there before the people. So, like, how do we engage? How do we engage with our phones? One, make sure there's towers up everywhere where you have good service, which seems a lot better than it used to be. Remember, you used to go in there and you had no service.
Bristol still got none.
Okay. You got to have that. I think you got to have interaction. And you're right. I think even the facilities themselves were built for, Charlotte was built for all of these people. And now we just take seats away, but it doesn't make you feel closer to the action or engaged in a way. Like, you just find your seat and you watch cars, and people want more than that now. People need.
You can't put that, Randy. You can't put 1% to 2% of your revenue rate back into facilities. You've got to put more than that. If it's a night race, you got to have jamming music, LEDs flashing. Like, it's got to feel like the place to be on a Saturday or Sunday night. And I'm very fortunate that I have gotten to live a lifestyle way beyond my means. And it's because of I've had a lot of friends that were wealthy individuals. And so I've gotten to go to a lot of really cool places, really cool venues, really amazing events, whether it be Super Bowls or, stadium concerts or whatever. I know what it's like to have a good time and what it takes to have a good time. And that's where we've got to get the fans back to, is when they come to the track, they know it's the place to be and they're going to have a really good time. And the race is certainly the primary reason for being there, but the primary reason they're going to come is to have fun.
Oh, for sure. See, I will say it always. If we're waiting on the race to be good, and this goes back to Adam Nelson, who's a promoter at Meridian Speedway. He's like, we've got to have one of three things happen every night. Like, it's got to be a great race, that they're a barn burner at the line, but I can't guarantee that's going to happen. So then I got to have this. I've got a way to entertain them if that doesn't happen. And if that doesn't happen, then I've got to have this. He's like, one of my three things has to hit, and one of them I can control. And so this is what I'm going to do. And you're right. You think of, let's go back to Charlotte when Humpy was there. He was leading edge of entertainment.
100%.
We're not leading edge of entertainment. I think we have the best racing product we've had in a long time. So we have that, but it's not leading. Like, let's talk about the infield. Like, we're doing concerts now. Are we doing concerts the night of? Are we, I don't know what it is, but there's a way to have, things for the fans where there's an open bar there, or there is a bar there, like, where people can camp. The owner of my company's like, what is it at a racetrack? And I'm like, it's camping. These people, this is where they camp. Instead of going to a national park, they go to a racetrack, and they're spending their hard-earned money. They have their RV. They're, Elijah and I watched it. They're cooking up in the morning. They're doing this and that. Like, where are the sponsors? Where are the egg companies? Where are the, who's interacting with the infield at these racetracks to make them feel like they're part of the event, not just parked their RV and got their spot, and then there's nothing for them? Is there grandstands for those RV people? Is there, there's just ways to cater to that group. And I feel like in that regard, in so many regards, well, this is the way we've always done it, yet we've changed everything else around us to not be the way we've always done it, right? There's, the racing product itself has changed greatly, but have we, I think you said it best. We're not leading edge of that side of it. And we once were.
And I think to go on the younger generation thing, to kind of go off of Brett, your point of like inviting people to the races. When I was living in Oklahoma and playing with my college baseball buddies, I'd be like, hey, I'm going to the races on Saturday. Who wants to come? Local dirt track. And they had a blast because they would pick a car. Each one of them would pick a car every race. Doesn't matter if it was a heat race or the main. They'd pick a car, and that's who they rooted for. And they rooted for them all night in that class, and they would pick, and that would be fun. And I took Emily to the Nashville Fairgrounds for the first time for All-American 400 a few years ago. And I said, okay, pick a car. And she was like, okay. And she picked it. And her car, I think, ended up running third. And it was right up there to win the race. And we got to connect the younger generation because they like their social media influence. And I'm the wrong person to ask because I would rather have a car than a phone. And I did clean up my car for dates who is now my wife. But people like the influencers and stuff. And we've talked about it before. We have to figure out how to connect this next generation to the drivers that they're watching. Whether it's they liked Kyle Busch as a kid because of M&Ms, because I've got a buddy, a really good friend, who liked Kyle Busch because of Interstate batteries, not M&Ms. And that's how he built that. And so we have to do a better job of getting them to hook up to a driver, less about the product, because the racing product, like we said, is great. And I will actually be an advocate. They wanted higher horsepower, and they didn't give him much higher horsepower, but they did at Darlington, and they gave him less downforce. And I thought, and I'm going to be very against the grain on traditionists here, I didn't like it. I knew exactly who was going to win that race from the drop of the green. I don't want to know exactly who's going to win the race because Tyler Reddick, they found the setup, and everybody was racing against the track instead of each other. Mile and a half with the new gen car and everybody being equal has been exciting. But that doesn't matter if they're not connected to a driver, if they don't have somebody to root for or root against.
But if you watch these races this weekend, I mean, this could have been some of the most drama-filled races on a Memorial Day weekend that we've ever seen, right? You have the closest finish in Indy history, amazing last corner pass. You have all the rain in Charlotte, and you have, races getting, whatever they call the shot clock expired or whatever the hell they did at 12 noon, which I wasn't a fan of. But nonetheless, a lot of drama, a lot of cool racing. Like if you watched a race this weekend and you don't leave there with a favorite new driver, then you simply don't have a brain, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not an IndyCar super fan. I am a fan of what they do. I don't mean any disrespect when I say this, but I mean, growing up in Pageland, South Carolina, they said those things were a coffin on wheels. And so you respected the kahunas of those guys just for what they did and went out and did in a race car. But obviously being around the sport and being around auto sports and motorsports, like, man, what I saw this weekend was nothing short of phenomenal. And there were several drivers in the race that I didn't know their name or their story. And now I do. And then you look at even the Coke 600, Daniel Suarez. This guy has been with some of the best teams in the garage at the cup level. You're talking about Joe Gibbs Racing, Stuart Haas Racing. You're talking about teams that not only won a lot of races, they won a lot of championships. And for whatever reason, Daniel could never really win. And then he gets to Trackhouse. He wins a race. Doesn't work out for him. He gets kicked out of Trackhouse. Now he's Aspire, and boom, he wins another race. He won a road course. Now he's won the Coke 600. And he's the kind of guy from an international perspective, we need him to win. NASCAR knows that. They know that we need him to win, but they can't make him win. All these stupid fans that are going, oh, conspiracy, NASCAR controls who wins. If they could pick who wins, I promise you that Daniel Suarez would have won a Coke 600 before now, right? Mm-hmm. He wins on one of the biggest American weekends of the year. This guy went and got his American citizenship. He loves America. He's almost like a documentary at this point to be where he is today. And I literally mean as of Sunday versus where he started. You come in with Eris out of Mexico with Carlos Slim, which was rumored to be $25 million in sponsorship. The money went to Carl Edwards. The money went to the Xfinity Series then. The money went to Daniel. Daniel run a full-time truck. This guy went from all the money in the world with Carlos Slim to almost a starting part when he was running that 96 Cup car with Marty Gaunt and those guys. So, man, his career has been the biggest roller coaster as it can be. And thank goodness he got another chance when he got to Trackhouse. And thank God he got another chance even after that to be where he's at now with Spire. Because when I look at Spire, I'm like, you don't really have an A-level driver. You're spending all this money for crew chiefs and all this money for engineers and pit crews. But until you go out and have an absolute stud, are you really going to know how good you are? Well, they've proven me wrong. They know how good they are. They won 2 races this year.
Yeah, seriously. And they invested. I think that speaks to investing in the crew chiefs and the other guys behind the scenes, because they've got a young guy in Hocevar who has got a ton of talent, but it's a bit of a wild thing. And then you've got Suarez, who has had this roller coaster career. You got McDowell.
Ton of experience.
Yeah, he's got a ton of experience. You got McDowell, who's got a ton of experience. He's on the way out. And so they're investing in some experienced crew chiefs as well. I think it's a true testament to it.
Well, and that's a long haul. That's a long play. I don't care what you pay some of those crew chiefs. They're not going there if you're a new organization, right? You have to start earning that because they want to win, right? Because that crew chief, he can win at one place, and if you don't give him all the tools and he doesn't believe he has the resources, I don't care what he gets paid. If he doesn't go there and win, his stock is shot, and he won't, it doesn't take long. Look at Rodney Childers. Dude was, on top of the world, and he went there and it just didn't click, work, or whatever. I'm sure there's more stories to that. Now I think he's doing what he absolutely loves to do, so it's perfect for him. But just like a driver. My career ended that way. I didn't want to go to the Xfinity car that they were trying to put me in because I knew it wasn't any good. Drivers, nobody had been fast in it. I knew they were changing from Chevy to Ford. I know there was no money being spent. And I pushed 3. I was the 3rd driver in it because I wouldn't go. And finally, basically, I was threatened that I had to go. And I went and I ran poorly. And it's pretty hard to come back from that sometimes, because people begin to question, could you go from a truck to Xfinity car? Could you drive? Could you, handle that? So, they've had to, their evolution is like they have to come as a team, then they have to hire from some good guys, and they have to have there's a great story there of building that on. And now they're starting to put the people in place. Now they're starting to put all the resources in place, and, it's starting to pay dividends more and more.
You just said something, Randy, and I want to back up to Kyle Busch a minute real quick. And we were talking about how quickly, Samantha and Brexton and the whole family showed up at the racetrack. You just said Rodney Childers, he's in a happy place, and Rodney lives around the corner from me, and he and I get the chance to run into each other from time to time. He's definitely in a happy place. But, I think one thing that we have to admit, and people have said this publicly a lot this weekend, you never know how people are going to choose to grieve. The Busch family only knows of one place to be, and that's at the racetrack. I saw a picture today of Kyle Busch and Brexton talking to John Force at the drag strip. Kyle Busch doesn't have to go to a drag strip. He's taking his son to the drag strip because he loves anything with a motor and 4 tires that's going to race. And maybe that's the only place they knew to be to feel his spirit, and to feel who Kyle was and to be where Kyle wanted him to be. You got Kurt out there laying flowers down before the race starts. I think I think Kyle Busch literally lived, eat, drank racing all day, every day for himself, his family. And I think that's why they went.
Well, I can tell you from our aspect, when I was no longer driving, the racetrack is a carnival, right? You guys all travel together. You all, all of your friends, you talk in your same circles, you see the same people, you begin to have this conversation. Like, that is absolutely family. When you step outside of that carnival continues to move on without you.
Yeah.
So for them, they have more friends and comfort in that, on that huge stage, no matter what it was. There probably was that, it was the best place for them to be. Like, they probably felt, even though going through the grief that they're going through is one, to honor him, right? That's where Kyle would have wanted to be. That's where Kyle would probably even want them. You saw Owen come up to Brexton. You saw the wives and Reddick's wife and, Larson's wife, and everybody surround Samantha. You can be brutal enemies, but we're all part of the same family. It's like,
100%.
And that's what you saw. I think that's what everybody loved. I think everybody, through the grieving process, no matter what it was, like, you lost one of your own, even if you didn't like him. Even if you didn't, Kyle Busch was never your guy, but he was part of your family. And that's what we have. And then with them going back there, a welcome face, a smile, there's just some comfort in that for them, because that was what was probably the most normal thing in their life, was the racetrack.
Let me ask you this about Memorial Day racing, because obviously Monaco jumped off the calendar, dropped off, whatever you want to call it, which I was kind of upset about. But man, I love that Truck Series race on Sunday morning before the 500. Like, I felt like that was, and listen, they were wrecking like they couldn't drive a freaking hot nail through butter. They looked like a bunch of idiots out there. But I truly loved watching that race that morning before we went into Indy. And I know FS1 and Fox are brothers and sisters in a network deal, but I didn't feel like it took away from Indy at all. Start that race at 9:30 in the morning on Sunday, and if you're buying a ticket to the Cup race, you get to come to the truck race for free, do the whole thing as general admission. Like, I could see that gaining a bunch of momentum, and again, making Charlotte the place to be for race fans.
Yeah, I saw you tweet that, or X that, or whatever. I don't know what you call an X. I call it a tweet.
It's a tweet.
And I thought, you're right. Like, I woke up and it was kind of like, I don't have Monte Carlo, and I don't watch Formula One. I watch it more than I probably have ever watched it, but it made the ultimate race day that much better, because I watched the trucks, I watched Indy, I watched Formula One, and then I watched Cup. Like, it just added something there. And, it was perfect, right? Like, it was even that much better. I liked it being Monte Carlo because it was tradition, but and I could probably easily miss that. But having the trucks on, yeah, change that up. That made it good. You know, there's something they can do Friday night for sure.
Yeah, and the timing, I mean, with watching the truck race, I mean, they had to do the clock and shorten it a little bit, which if they wouldn't have wrecked so many times, they probably wouldn't have had to do that. So, but I hated the clock. But the truck race got over, and then I got to switch over and watch all the Indy pre-race tradition stuff that I love. You didn't miss any of the back home in Indiana taps.
I didn't miss nothing. And I tell you what else I got to see. Danica Patrick is hotter now than she was when she was a NASCAR driver. And I didn't think that was possible. I literally go get my 19-year-old daughter, and I'm like, you got to come see this. Look how ripped and buff Danica is. I think she could whip Tony's ass right now. Like, she had me fired up, man. And I'd leave this truck race, and I flipped the channel, Elijah, just like you did. I'm like, here's my 2 NASCAR people on this IndyCar race who, oh, by the way, were IndyCar drivers before they got here. Like, I just thought the tie-in was phenomenal. I got all sorts of pumped up.
Yeah, it was awesome. It kind of built that excitement up a little bit because you're like, you switch over and you're like, here's a familiar face. And you rolled with the momentum.
Yeah, I was pumped up, man. It was cool to see Tony on there. I mean, you know, there's a guy that literally has won in everything he's ever done and a world-class talent. I mean, a Kyle Larson before Kyle Larson existed. Like, if you weren't around for the Tony Stewart days of when he rolled in here as a rookie. And I'm telling you, Elijah, every rookie I saw come into Cup before Tony Stewart, they were pretty chill. They didn't really challenge the older guys. I mean, you look at Jeff Gordon's rookie year and think about how great he was. I think he wrecked 14 race cars. So he wasn't the guy that come in here like with his chest stuck out. Tony come in here wanting to kick everybody's ass. It didn't matter if you were Robbie Gordon or Dale Earnhardt. It was 1999, and he's like, and dude, I'm gonna tell you, it was the Busch Series back then that he raced on Saturday. He wasn't that good. He drove that number 44 shell car, and I was never impressed. And I will never forget, you know, Elliott's rookie year was Tony's rookie year, and by May, Elliott and I are talking. We're like, man, you know, Elliott literally would say, Randy, sitting at dinner, I kicked Tony's ass every time we ever raced on Saturdays. And now I can't even see him. Like, he all of a sudden came to life. But I tell you what, man, he didn't take any crap from anybody.
Yeah. No.
He a lot with those guys because Jimmy wasn't great on Saturday. Jeff didn't have that much, but they got in a Cup car and they figured it out. So, and they used to drive different. So
Jimmy also went to Hendrick Motorsports. That matters.
That helps. That helps a lot.
And I'm going to tell you what else he did. He ruined everybody's weekend that was a Cup driver at the time because Jimmy came in here and starting on Thursdays, he was carb loading. He was running marathons. Like, he took the fun. I mean, Clint had the Jack Daniels sponsorship during that era. Clint couldn't even sniff Jack Daniels on the weekend if he wanted to see Jimmy Johnson's rear bumper on a Sunday. Like, Jimmy came in with this whole different training regimen. I'll never forget, Jamie McMurray went and hired Ricky Carmichael's trainer. And Jamie paid him a large sum of money. I'm not going to say how much, but it was a large sum of money. Well, Jamie went out that year and set the world on fire, won 2 races, finished third, or second, I think, in the Coke 600. But, like, man, Jimmy Johnson completely changed the game. But let's not skip the fact that he did go from Herzog Motorsports to Hendrick Motorsports. Yeah. Both were HMSs, but they weren't the same.
Yeah. You know, it's funny you say that about Jimmy, because I remember being at Fontana and I'd stepped away and he just started, you know, winning. And I remember, because I knew Harvick, you know, fairly well from running the trucks and Xfinity with him. And I remember going, is Jimmy Johnson that good? And I remember talking to 3 different people, from engineering to crew chiefs to, you know, to Harvick. And they were all like, yes, he's that good. And I remember just the respect that he was given because of how dedicated he was to being good. You know, like that was kind of an evolution, right? Where, you know, some were just naturally talented. They could just get behind the wheel and drive.
Yep,
and
Tony Stewart.
Then you had somebody come in that said, all right, equally, I might be able to drive, but I'm going to make myself better because I'm going to be fit at the end of that race. I'm going to
outwork you. I'm going to outwork you is what he did. Yeah.
And he outworked him, I think, in all aspects. You know, I don't know that any of us were watching tape, you know, of previous races. I don't know. Like, you know, you think of how a driver preps today. we prepped by talking to the crew chief on what kind of setups we thought we were going to run, and that was kind of it. And you unloaded. Now you know the amount of prep. You know, you've watched the races on video. You watch tape. You know what's happening. You've ran in the sim. You've done this. Like, it takes a different type of driver than what those are. I don't know that Tony Stewart would have been as great today as he was then because of that dedication and what he wanted to do that. Like, I'm not taking it away how talented he was behind the wheel, because I've raced with him on many, many levels, and he's, you know, an unbelievable talent. But the race car driver today is very different than Dale Earnhardt or Richard Petty was. You know, like when people want to compare era to era, it's like, it's not the same, man. Like, these kids today wouldn't be grinding. They wouldn't want to be race car drivers if they had to work on the cars and stay in a Motel 6. You know, like, they just wouldn't be it. It's not that interesting to them unless they have this lifestyle or this side. So the sport continues to evolve, and we're at that again. I mean, Reddick was talked about a couple years ago about being that good. That's why 2311, you know, went after him when he was at Childress. And, you know, he's this driver. And then who's next? Is it Hocevar? Is he going to break through at that point and start being that guy? Or is you know, Heim going to come in, you know, and he's looked very good, very fast? Or is it Brent Cruz? Or is it like, you know, there's just it's interesting to see who that next guy is.
I think this was a rich man's hobby for a long time. And then guys like Rick Hendrick and Roger Penske, you know, it became a business. You know, I mean, even when you look at the racers that are still around, and I don't know, you know, the Wood brothers 100%. You know, they've obviously been here forever. You know, Richard Childress has been here forever. But, you know, the Bill Davises of the world and those guys that came in here, I think, wanting to race because they loved it and they had money. I think it was just a hobby for them. Did they want to win? 100% they did. Did they land sponsorship? Yes, they did all the things that it took to be competitive, but it became a business at some point, Randy. And I was here when it happened, and I still couldn't tell you exactly what year it was, but I had a very prominent businessman tell me that Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s rookie contract at the time when he signed that Bud deal to go cup racing with DEI was more of a retainer, higher base salary than what Dale Earnhardt was getting driving the GM Goodwrench car.
Yeah.
So you got to kind of think around then something happened to make it be a business, because it is, and I tell people this all the time, it's a lot different than when I started. And it's not different in a bad way. It's just completely different. It's almost like the Jimmy Johnson thing we were talking about. He got here and changed the world in the way he would outwork you, and the business changed. You know, when you look at what's going on in the sponsorship world. I mean, Rick Hendrick is making money owning a race team. 85% of his partners are tied to his automotive business. His footprint is now worth, we just talked about, $600-700 million between the amount of real estate that he has in Concord with those race shops on it, plus the charters, plus all the things. Like, that wasn't the case, you know, even 20 years ago. It wasn't even thought about. When Rob Kaufman was here, and he was, you know, the majority owner of Michael Waltrip Racing. And Denny Hamlin had already got here and been like, I want a driver's union. And they were like, we'll kick your ass out of here. Go ahead and try it. You know, and then Denny Hamlin's trying to do this charter thing. Well, Rob Kaufman was involved, obviously, in that. And Rob Kaufman got some of his money back on his way out the door of MWR, you know, because he sold those charters to Chip Ganassi. But it's crazy to just see the business evolution. And me and you were talking earlier, like, I came in as this PR guy making $30,000 a year. My first job, I handed out, literally my first weekend, I handed out 100,000 Band-Aids at Richmond International Raceway. And I thought, I had a cool job. This sucks. I'm sunburnt, my feet hurt, and all I did was hand out Band-Aids, right? And then I get the opportunity to learn more about PR, learn more about hospitality, get into driver management, get into spotting, get into owning a marketing company with Dale Jarrett as a mentor. So my career certainly changed a lot over 25 years, but the sport has changed even more than that. Like, it's just crazy. And I will say, you know, when I stopped working really, really, really hard in the sport, drivers were making bank. You could be a bad driver and make $8 or $9 million a year. But you had and Mike Bliss wasn't a bad driver. He was a good driver. He wasn't in a great position. But when he landed that Viagra sponsorship, I would imagine he was making a pretty darn good living, right? There are guys now, that 3-4 years ago when I stopped podcasting, there were guys making less than $1 million a year from a base salary perspective. And I just don't think that's fair. I don't even think it's right, not at the Cup level. And I mean, you had guys that were on a salary cap. A friend of mine, his salary cap was $750,000, and he hit it by July. And the only way he got paid between July and November was if he hit a bonus, which was primarily winning a race or winning a pole, right? So, like, I hated that part of the sport. Now, with these charters being worth a lot of money, these owners are worth more money. Their footprints are worth more money. They've got more equity in their real estate, so to speak. Now the drivers are making more money again, and we need them. You said we need them to feel like heroes. Well, heroes should get paid. Heroes are putting their lives on the line, their safety on the line. I feel like the sport in general on the business side right now is back moving in a really, really, really good spot.
Yeah.
I agree.
Awesome. Well, we like to try to stay around the hour, and we could go on for days.
I was going to say, you brought the wrong guy on here, man. I hadn't got to talk to nobody in 2 years. I miss talking to people.
Well, we got to have you back.
Yeah, we'll have you back for sure.
Yeah, I will say this before I jump, or before you guys have to jump. Man, I miss talking to race fans, and I miss seeing race fans at the racetrack, and I miss them all telling me how stupid I am and how I don't know anything and how my experience is worthless. And I also miss the ones that want to give me a hug and tell me I'm the greatest thing ever, right? So I appreciate y'all having me on. Elijah's been talking to me for a little while about it. I'm glad it finally worked out. I am in Myrtle Beach. I am in a condo because my daughter is at my beach house, and I don't trust her down here with a bunch of 18-year-olds by herself. So I'm like 15 minutes away. The air conditioning is broken in the condo, thus my face is more red than it normally is, and it's always red. My blood pressure did get up a few times tonight during this podcast, talking about things that get me excited. But first and foremost, it's just fun to reconnect, tell stories, and man, I could sit here telling stories all day. I wish we could tell them all, but we can't. There was a time in 600 North, Elijah, that me and Randy had a really good time back in the day, and your mom and dad could tear up a dance floor, and I know he probably at 70 years old with that cane in his hand drinking his Ensure, he can't do it anymore. But there was a time when your dad was really fun.
I still think my dad's plenty fun, so we have good adventures.
Yeah,
there'll be time for those stories though, for sure. And like I said, we got to have you back on because we could talk all day. And so anytime you want to come on, if you're itching, you have my number, you can text. But I will.
That sounds good.
But before we get out of here, we have a set of questions that we like to ask all our guests, just to get the varying personalities and see what they like, and because we're fortunate enough to have a lot of different people on here. So I will start off. First one, favorite track.
Man, that one's really tough. Daytona when I drive through the tunnel, but Bristol to race on.
Okay. I've not been to Daytona yet, but I've been to Bristol. So I got to cross.
Driving through that tunnel at Daytona, man, and I only like to go through the small tunnel outside of turn 4. You can jump your car. If I shouldn't tell that, I'm going to get in trouble again. If you get going fast enough, you can actually make your car jump, can't you, Randy, when you come out of that tunnel because the angle's like this.
Well, next time somebody jumps a car, they're going to come calling you.
I know.
The most memorable race you've got to watch?
You got to say Dale Earnhardt's Daytona 500 win. I grew up, man, a small town kid thinking that Dale Earnhardt was the biggest thing in the world. I was a Dallas Cowboys fan, but they were like a very, very, very distant second to how popular Dale Earnhardt was in my mind. So watching him finally get that Daytona 500 win was hands down my favorite race as a fan to watch.
Your racing hero growing up?
Dale Earnhardt. But it actually, before that, was a guy named Tommy Mungo at Lancaster Speedway, a dirt track about 30 minutes outside of Pageland. We went to Chester every Friday night and Lancaster every Saturday night. And then if the Cup race was close, we drove all night Saturday in the motorhome and would wake up at the racetrack on Sunday. And Tommy drove the number 30 Tucker Lumber Company Super Dirt Late model. And man, that was my hero until I fell in love with Dale Earnhardt.
It's a good one. You got to have a local guy and a national guy.
You do, 100%.
Best track food?
Dude, it's Indianapolis right now, and I'm going to tell you why. we talked about the experience. Food Truck Central. There are food trucks lined up all the way around this place, and you can get everything from a prime rib sandwich to quality Mexican food. So for me, in the current world, it would be Indianapolis. If you made me go back earlier in my career, New Hampshire Motor Speedway, because the Lions Club gets a food little booth in there, and they've got like homemade sausage biscuits and like it's good old country cooking.
Well,
But those are my two favorite.
what was the Dover bratwurst and egg thing? Did you ever eat that?
I always did the grotto pizza, so I never did no, I never did that one. I know what you're talking about though.
They got them off site. They weren't on site, but
No,
they were
no,
off
they were
site.
off site. Yeah,
Does St. Elmo's have a food truck with just the shrimp cocktails?
that's what we need. Like St. Elmo's got a spot now in the airport, and they sell their cocktail sauce in the airport. And I actually bring some home every time I go. But man, St. Elmo's that's probably the most famous restaurant on the NASCAR tour. And obviously it's in Indy, the heart of open wheel country. But St. Elmo's is the place to be.
Yeah.
Even I've heard of St. Elmo's, so
Yeah.
probably from you and Mom talking about it or something. Your favorite current series to watch?
Oh man, I hate to say this, but it's not even close. The O'Reilly series. I mean, we talked about some of the things that baseball changed to make the game more relevant again, and I feel like the length is perfect. And what's crazy is you don't typically have like a big superstar in there, and I'm the one on Twitter fussing all the time saying we're lacking star power in the Cup Series. The O'Reilly series is so damn good, you don't even need star power. The racing is that good.
Yeah.
So it's my favorite by far.
Yeah.
It to me is like the minor leagues trying to earn their shot. When you go to a minor league game, man, you see a guy still laying out for a ball, or you see, going the extra base, or, it just seems a little bit more raw and hungry.
Yeah.
You got to love that.
There's 8 guys in there right now, and I'm not going to name them. There's 8 guys I would easily take and kick 8 guys out of the Cup Series tomorrow. Easily.
Well, they're going to eventually. So, like we said, there's your up and comers, and with all different backgrounds. It's a fun series to watch. It's a fun series to watch. I agree with you there. Your ultimate goal in your rest of your racing career?
Dude, I've hit it. I mean, I hate to say that, Randy, at 51 years old, but man, when I quit the full-time thing, a few years ago, and Chris Rice called me, and I'm gonna say he begged me to make myself feel good, but he talked me into coming back to spot full-time on Saturday and Sunday for Daniel Hemrick and Justin Haley. And that whole year, I loved working with those guys, 2 great personalities. But I told Chris at Watkins Glen that year, I said, I'm not doing Saturday racing at all, no matter what. And here are my conditions that I would need in order to commit to doing Sunday. And he and I weren't able to, reach an agreement on that negotiation for me to return to do Justin Haley. But, Elijah, the number one reason that I was dying being at the racetrack every single weekend, all weekend, was Bodie playing baseball. Like I could not, I was more worried about game changer when the caution come out than what our pit strategy was. And that's not fair to the team. And so, man, I will tell you, part-time this year, I was supposed to do 9 or 10 races for RCR. I think I've done 7. And at this point, given what's happened with Kyle, I don't know if I'll be doing any more or not, because obviously Austin Hill right now is running for Kyle. And if that continues, my next race was, I think, supposed to be Michigan. And I don't see that happening given the changes they have with Andy Street, leaving the part-time RCR car to go be with the 8. And now a new driver going to be in what now is the 33, was the 8. And if I'm done going to the racetrack this season, that's okay. But I will tell you, perfect world scenario, dream job would be 1 Cup race a month for the rest of my life, or until I'm Randy's age and I'm not any good at it anymore.
All right. I like, because we had Charles Kroll on a while ago, and said his ultimate goal, and he said he was living his dream. He'd already lived his dream already. So it's fun to hear both the people who are early in their careers with the aspirations and the people who have loved every second that they've gotten to live. So,
dude, I have lived. I mean, me and Elliot were talking about this literally last week. He's like, man, I felt like I lived 2 lives, and now like I don't have my other life. All I have is this, small town life where I'm hunting and baseball and racing, and that's all I do. And it's like that life was, so far removed. And I was like, I'm in that transition now, and I get where he's coming from. But it's a big change to go from being a full-time successful Cup Series driver to not driving at all. And I was always one that said out loud, I'm not going to let this sport tell me when I'm done. I'm going to be done when I want to be done, because I've seen a lot of people walk away with their heart broke because the sport looks at them and says, get out. And I mean, and I'm talking about former Cup drivers that turn spotters that still don't want to get out, and they're kicked out, right? So I wasn't going to let the sport break my heart. I wasn't going to let it do that to me and make me have this bitterness that I would have to live with. I always said I will go out when I'm ready. And I may not get to go out exactly like I want, but I'm in a really good spot.
Good.
Awesome.
Last one, favorite hobby outside of racing?
Dude, it's watching my little boy play ball. Right now my girls have both graduated high school, so their dancing careers are over. I will tell you this though, they got me on the pickleball court, and as a nasty ping pong player and as a really shitty tennis player, I think there's a happy medium in this world of pickleball where I can be kind of average at 50 and fat. You know what I'm saying?
Pickleball's fun.
Now, I saw you dance at wherever it was, and I
might have had a heart
you
attack.
got the moves, you just don't have the endurance.
I look at my face, turn around again. Randy, I about died. Like, I almost called 911. I was like 3 moves in, and I was like, all right, I'm going to do a New Kids on the Block move. And I did it, and I was like, all right, now I'm going to do an MC Hammer move. Then I did it, and I was like, now I'm going to do a Bobby Brown move. No, I ain't going to do that move. I'm done. And so that's kind of how that went.
That's awesome.
I got to ask y'all, since y'all got to ask me questions. Elijah, you've been very fortunate to grow up with super parents and around the sport. What's your favorite racing memory?
Ooh, I talked about my most memorable race last week on our podcast, but my favorite racing memory was growing up as a kid in the pits, walking around the pits, meeting drivers, getting autograph cards, going and sitting in the cars. And because we talked about, those guys were superheroes. It didn't matter if you were a 6th place street stock driver at Meridian Speedway or you were Jimmy Johnson or Tony Stewart. I got to go meet them and take my picture and talk to them. And those were the best. And that was every time any racetrack felt like home if I was just wandering through the pits. Didn't matter if I knew somebody or didn't know somebody. It was my favorite was just races got over. All right, let's go to the pits, and I'm going to go sit in as many cars and get as many autographs as I can.
Yeah, I remember you when you were a baby, man. And my favorite thing about you is I can tell how much you love your dad, man. And that makes my heart happy. Randy, I'm going to give you a harder question. What is the one thing, because you were a hell of a race car driver. You won races at Renzi Motorsports and equipment that a lot of guys wouldn't have been able to win in. What is the one thing that you wish you had a second chance at? Putting you on the spot.
Yeah, very few people probably know this, but when I was at Express Motorsports, the truck behind you, and they'd given me the shot to go down to NASCAR. Tiffany and I lived above the race shop. We just moved into an apartment. We watched TV in the transport because we didn't even have, that. Tiffany had a job in the office, and we'd won in our 13th race. And I got the call from Richard Childress.
Ooh.
And Jay Sauter wasn't running well. And I still felt loyal to the 61 team that gave me a shot. And I just didn't know. I wasn't sure of myself at the time enough to take that leap. And, you question that the rest of your life. I remember Bliss and I were talking at Darlington a few weeks ago, and we were talking about Harvick being in the backseat of my Durango as we went to go fly out and land on the USS Eisenhower. He's like, man, I got all these offers, and Childress is one of them, and I don't know which one to pick. And you think, Mike and I were talking about, man, you think of we were all at those decision-making points at some point, and he made the right one.
Yeah.
And, when you talk about Mike Bliss, That guy is probably about as talented behind the wheel as anybody I ever met on asphalt. And yet, and he showed it in the ASC truck with, there, but, that was still an independent truck. Like, in that era, we didn't have all Ilmores. Like, we got T&L engines and they were fantastic. But I remember driving the Aero truck for Chevrolet that Hendrick prepared. And I remember going back and going, this is the Aero truck. This is not even the backup engine. This is just a test truck. And the gear I'm pulling here and the RPM I'm pulling this thing, it's not everywhere close to what we can do.
Right.
So, Danny Lawrence was a big fan of mine. The engineer, like all of that, because they were fans of Thursday Night Thunder. So then I won that early race and got that call from Richard. And I just said, I have to be loyal and flush this out. And I think I was fired later that year. Like, so, that's the sport of racing. So, I would say
that is the sport of racing, 100%. And loyalty will almost get you nowhere a lot of the time.
Most of the time.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
I honored every contract I ever had, handshake or not. And, as much as I would have loved to stay in the sport, I would have loved Elijah to see me in the heyday. And when I was, somebody there, I'll at least always be thankful that I honored those agreements.
Yeah. You sleep good at night, man. And that's good. And
I don't know that
you guys.
I don't know that I sleep good sometimes.
Well, eat one of them melatonin gummies. I started taking those when I couldn't sleep last year. And now I have the craziest dreams. Like after seeing you and Elijah for the last 2 hours, I'm afraid of what I'm even going to dream tonight after I eat these 10 milligram melatonin, however you say it, gummies.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's been great having you on, my friend. This is why we do this, because Elijah and I always just talk to sport and talk racing, and we decided to do something. So thank you for coming on. I know, you have a presence in the sport, and you have a lot of loyal fans that appreciate your passion and your openness. And I think sometimes the sport really misses that true openness. And you also have, just so much history and knowledge on how things work. So we'd love to have you back, because it's just been fun. And that's why we do it. It
has been fun, man. The greatest compliment I've been paid from a race fan, and this was at the racetrack. He walked up to me and said, "Thanks for being the voice of the fans." And, I spent a decade not intentionally being that voice, but that's why I got here, because of my passion for the sport as a fan, as a kid that started watching at 4 years old. And man, the sport's been great to me. And it's because of relationships, meeting guys like you and families like yours that will always mean more than the racing. And I wish fans could ultimately understand what that means, but it's so much bigger than just the racing. And spending time with you guys tonight just proves that for me, man. So I appreciate y'all having me on, and we'll definitely catch back up. I'm gonna tell you though, Elijah, I'm gonna be at the beach for the next month, so it'll have to be later in the summer.
It's all right. Whenever it happens, it'll be good.
Cheers, fellas. I appreciate y'all.
Yeah, thank you guys.
All right. Have a good night. See you.
See you, Brett.
Thanks.
All right. Signing off. Episode 17 of Fast Motor Podcast every Wednesday, YouTube and Spotify. And stay tuned for our next guest announcement. Potentially working on something another unique one. So hopefully stay tuned for that later this week. See you guys.